Of all the people I interviewed over the years, as far as Britain is concerned, Marjorie Proops is probably one of the biggest stars. Even though she wasn't in films, she wasn't in plays, she wasn't a television personality, she was purely, really a print journalist, but her influence was huge. She had millions of fans in Britain. She was a journalist for the Daily Mirror, which was the paper of the Labour Party, but she was also one of the first agony aunts in Britain. She used to write a weekly column for Woman's Mirror, and then she wrote a daily column for the Daily Mirror. And she would answer every kind of problem that would be presented to her. And she made sure that every single letter she received was answered by either herself personally or by her team of researchers and secretaries. Marge herself was famous for her glasses and for her cigarette holder. Even though she gave up smoking later, she was always seen rather dashingly with a cigarette holder, and that is how she was presented in the paper and in the magazine. I interviewed her for Personal magazine, and we talked about insecurity. Quite an interesting little interview. But I was struck by just how guarded she was. She didn't seem a relaxed person, and she certainly didn't seem a happy person. She talks in the interview about her marriage, and she stylizes it as happy and contented. Later on, we found out it was anything but. It was a very unhappy marriage in many aspects, and in 1993, when her autobiography was published, she announced at the press club lunch that she had actually been having an affair with the head of the Daily Mirror's legal department for 20 years while she was married to her husband, whose name was Sidney Proops, or Proopsy, as she called him. So the interview was not totally true. She had an image to keep up, and she tried to give the world the feeling that she came from a stable background. Her real background was a Jewish one. She was born Rebecca Israel. Her parents changed that name to Rael because of the anti-Semitic feeling in England at the time, and later, when she went out to work, she used her middle name, which was Marjorie, instead of her real name, which was Rebecca. So she was well used to prejudice, and she would campaign against prejudice of many kinds during her career, including in 1964 a groundbreaking article on homosexuality, male homosexuality, which of course at that time was totally illegal. Marjorie Proops was one of the key players in changing the law which made homosexuality into something legal instead of something illegal for gay men in Britain. So, good on you, Marge.
I can recall reading stories of disasters that were going to overtake us. That by the beginning of the, by 1970, and I think to myself, well, here we are in 1975, and it didn't happen. Like everybody was going to be starving by 1975. Well, it's true that a lot of people are starving in 1975 in the world, but the entire world is not starving. And there are all sorts of prognoses that are made that never come to pass. And despite these insecurities, that personal ones that I've talked to you about, I am an optimist by nature, which I think has got nothing to do with being insecure. My husband is a pessimist, and we have this joke in our family, like I am the one who says the bottle's half full, and he's the one who says it's half empty. So I always anticipate that things are going to be better, and I never believe that they're going to be as bad as the pessimists say they are. But that doesn't prevent me from despairing about some things that happen. I mean, I am despairing right now about the war in Indochina that never stops, and what's going to happen there next. I despair about India, a country I happen to know slightly and love. a country which is without hope. And these are the sort of things that make me despair. But on the other hand, you see on the wall there photographs of my grandchildren, and I don't keep looking at them and saying, my God, what kind of a world is this that they've been born into. I think to myself, my God, they've got a challenge.
It does sound terribly much like the Marjorie Proops that we know and love in the newspaper, sort of indomitable and optimistic. You must have some insecurities, and it would be impossible for a person not to have any insecurities. I won't perhaps ask you what they are, but if you could perhaps tell me, supposing you do have them, how do you cover them up?
Well, I think that the easiest way is to tell you what they are. I mean, I've told you already about the work one.
Yeah.
One of them, and I suppose it's something to do with, well, I don't know what it's to do with. I hate, for example, I am terrified of going to parties on my own, going anywhere on my own. I don't even like going and having lunch in a restaurant on my own. I'm embarrassed. If I have to go to receptions, as I do a lot, and I know I'm going to be faced with a lot of people whom I don't know, and to find something to talk to them about or listen to them. And I'm very nervous. I hate it. I'd give anything just to go straight home. But obviously, doing the sort of job I do, and being to some extent a public figure, I'm compelled to do these things that I don't like doing. And so the only way I can get over them is by simply bracing myself and doing them, like, stepping into a cold ocean. You have to do it. And so I just do it. But I don't like it.
In what ways do you brace yourself? Are there any little tricks and party tricks that you do?
Well, I just talk to myself severely.
In the lavatory before?
Oh, maybe on the taxi, on the car. On the way, I say, now pull yourself together, Marge, I say to myself. And don't be so ridiculous.
Do you have physical manifestations?
Yes, I get clammy hands.
Clammy hands,
Yes.
Do you find lighting a cigarette helps?
Oh, yes. I'm never without it. Even when it's not going, here it is now.
Yes.
No light on it. And
if you were told that you had to give up cigarettes, what do you think you could give them up?
I'd find it very difficult. I mean, I have been told to give them up. In fact, I don't any longer smoke cigarettes, I smoke cigars. But because I was told to give up smoking cigarettes. But it would be very difficult for me. I don't know what I'd do instead. Tear up handkerchiefs, maybe, or something neurotic. But I don't drink, you see, or very, very little. I'm a very, very modest drinker. I suppose people who drink get a bit of courage from drinking, but it doesn't help me at all.
But what is it actually that makes you feel insecure? Is it strange surroundings, strange people,
strange
or just gatherings of people?
Gatherings of people.
Even if they all know you and...
Oh no, if I know them all and they're all my mates and that's fine. But it's gatherings of strange people.
Do you find meeting famous people difficult, or is it
It doesn't, any people.
Do you ever stammer or stutter or anything?
No. And nobody realizes it, because I know I give an impression to people of being immensely self-confident. I know this.
And this is
So
just...
it's a great act.
This is just because of these talks you give yourself in the taxi?
It's because of years of self-discipline, really.
Self-discipline to do what? I mean, how would you be if you weren't self-disciplined?
Well, I just wouldn't go, would I?
You just wouldn't go
I'd
at
just
all.
stay away.
Do you, when you go into a room, stand there and wait for people to come up to you, or do you go?
I almost always wait for somebody to come up to me. Mostly, of course, nowadays, if I go to big gatherings, I see somebody I know somewhere, I spot an acquaintance, and I might well make a beeline for somebody I know. But if I didn't know anybody, I would just stand there. I once went to some reception at the Savoy Hotel, and I didn't know for about half an hour, but I went to the wrong one. There were 2 or 3, probably half a dozen going on in various rooms, and I ambled in my usual nervous state, smoking away, and looking round, hopefully, to find somebody I knew. It wasn't anybody I knew at all. So I kind of hovered near the door, and somebody came up and spoke to me, and it helps a lot to be recognizable. I've got one of those recognizable faces.
But yet earlier you said that you would play. You're not playing now. I mean, you aren't playing, definitely. But as a young girl, you were playing.
Oh yeah, I am playing now. But nevertheless, it's a recognizable plainness. You know, I mean, I know that after all, my face is in the Daily Mirror at least once a week, in Sunday Mirror once a week. You know, it goes on television, and it appears here and there. So that it's a face that people have become accustomed to. It's even on the buses. And so people recognise it, and when people recognise a face, they're apt to come and talk to its owner.
Does this make you insecure that they're expecting you to be a certain kind of person? Do you feel you've got to, I don't quite know what your image is, but if you're feeling depressed that day, does it matter? Do you have to try and put on that you're not depressed?
No, because not really often, touching wood, very depressed. Tired, maybe. So sometimes I have to pretend that I'm not tired. You know, this is a demanding job, and I do get weary at the end of the day sometimes, and would like to go home and put my feet up, and I can't. I have to go somewhere. And so, and I can't just stand around looking tired, so I then have to try to look bright and fresh. No, I'm not depressed. Very, very rarely depressed.
Are you very aware of insecurity in other people that you work with, people that you meet at parties?
Oh, yes.
What signs do they give you that they are insecure?
Well, there are lots of signs. When some people, like me, I recognise as the people who smoke incessantly, the people who drink, not that drinks, at great speed, people who talk a lot, and loudly, and laugh a lot, in an effort to cover up their nervousness, and pluck at their clothes. Women do this quite a lot. They fiddle about, and they fiddle with their hair, and they pet their hair.
You know, I thought only female impersonators did that. I've never seen
Oh no, women do that. Yes, they do. And I mean, if female impersonators do it, female impersonators are so good. They're so observant. After all, they study women. I know Danny LaRue, for example, very well. He's a great friend of mine, and I know how he observes women.
Actually, it's quite interesting to talk about insecurity. I wonder if he feels insecure out of his drag. I mean, I wonder if when he walks into a room, people are really expecting the glamorous Dan in the room when he comes in wearing the suit. It'd be interesting to...
Yes, it would be. I don't think so, really. No, because Danny has this... he's very clever, Danny. And he knows that when he puts on his drag, that he is a different LaRue. And the real Danny LaRue, he regards the male Danny LaRue as himself, the grey-haired, good-looking bloke, as the real Danny LaRue. And he's very personable, and he's very nice, and a very attractive citizen. And people like him, and they warm to him. And I wouldn't have thought that he would be insecure when he's out of drag. I've never actually discussed it with him, but I'd be very surprised if he was.
Do you find most people you meet are insecure?
Well, I don't know. I think a lot of people are, but then it's not something that you really talk to people about.
But from these signs that we were talking about, do most people exhibit...
Well, even the signs, you see, you're not always aware of them. I mean, you're not... I don't spend the whole of my life, going to parties and watching for people's... watching for people to demonstrate their insecurity. But there are certain times when it's more obvious than at other times. One of the things, for example, that I have to do quite a lot is interview people. And interview people for jobs, because I have quite a considerably large staff here. And there's a fair amount of movement, and I interview people for jobs. And then I watch, because I'm then aware of what I'm looking for. And then I watch people for signs of insecurity. And they're nervous when they're being interviewed. And for some reason that I find very hard to understand, they are later, when we get to know each other, confess that they found the prospect of being interviewed by me formidable. Howard did. He was all of a shake when he came in here the other day. And terrified, he kept saying. He was terrified. But I thought this really odd and rather funny. But if I'm interviewing people for a job, then I'm aware of these demonstrations of their nervousness and insecurity. Then that's understandable, because that's a situation in which you would expect this to happen. You know, if you go to a dinner party or a reception somewhere, where you're not keenly aware that people are showing signs of their nervousness. In any case, you're often so busy covering up your own that you forget about looking for other people's.
Well, we can talk about your letters. I don't know how many letters you have coming in a day or a week, but it's obviously a great deal.
It's about 40,000 a year.
What is the main... You know, if they sort of have a corporate cry, what would that corporate cry be?
Help, help.
Yeah. Would you say most of them are insecure about themselves? You know, do most of them seem to worry about themselves as personalities? Do they have sort of strong personalities or weak personalities?
Well, you see, the problems range over a very wide area of age and problem. It's very ungrammatical. I hope when you write all this up, you'll tidy it all up. What I'm trying to say is that there is every kind of problem from people of every kind of of every age, from 9 to 90. And the problems range from children's difficulties with their parents to teenage problems, adolescent problems, which can be acne, or how do I get to know this boy, or how do I get to know this girl, or homosexual problems, both sexes, then matrimonial problems, problems to do with sex, or to do with money, or to do with religion, or to do with in-laws. Then the problems of parents with teenage children, and the problems which come with advancing years, problems that women have during the menopause, problems of men who are impotent, who can no longer gratify their wives or their mistresses. But there are still a hell of a lot of people who don't write or don't take their problems to somebody else. Now, they may well have problems, but perhaps quite a lot of them are able to cope with them. I get only the letters from people who can't cope. So presumably, the people who can't cope are insecure people.
Do you think perfect security is a good thing to aim for? Complete security?
I think emotional security is a good thing to aim for, because as I said earlier, if you've got that, then you can cope with all the other things. You can cope with all sorts of despair if you've got this one great thing to hang on to that makes you feel safe in an unsafe world. You can cope with financial insecurity much more easily, at any rate, if you've got emotional security. And because security is not just security in one area alone, this is why it's difficult to generalize about it. It's why it's difficult to talk about it as one thing. It isn't. It's a number of different elements.
And by that token, insecurity too is a number of different
Yes.
elements that build up into one big insecurity.
Yes.
So if you felt you had a good emotional relationship, then you wouldn't worry about your looks. And,
That's right. I mean, it was when I had a good emotional relationship and emotional security that I stopped worrying about my looks. I mean, I'm aware of them, but I no longer worry about them. I think they're rather funny now.
Do you think a lot of people think of security more in the terms of having a house with the mortgage paid off, having all the material things in life?
Yeah.
Does this come out?
Yes, I think so. Oh, yes, very much so.
And then why are they writing the letters? I mean, if people that have got all the material advantages, why do they have problems?
Well, they might have some other problem. They might have a sexual problem. You could have a sexual problem if you lived in Buckingham Palace.
More so there.
Yeah, quite right. So that it's not a question. Financial security certainly doesn't mean that you don't have problems. You can have acne if you've got financial security, or you can have BO, or you can have an unfaithful husband. with all the financial security in the world.
If you go out to a party or something and you suddenly realise there is a strange smell, I mean, you might have stepped in some dog muck or something like that, or you might have come out the door into the taxi and suddenly a great shower of rain had come down upon your head, which you so carefully, had done. Would this really faze you that much by now?
Not now. It would make me laugh, actually.
Would it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I should think so.
Could you give me an example of a very secure person? I think you're probably a fairly good example of a secure person, but it's difficult to talk about oneself. Is there anyone that you know that you've perhaps given me by name and say, I feel he or she is completely secure?
Well, I know a few people who are secure in some ways and insecure in others, but they're mostly friends of mine. Whose names you wouldn't even know if I told them to you, and I wouldn't tell them to anyway. I mean, I have a woman friend who is successful in her work and secure in her job, very, who is emotionally secure. She has a very happy marriage that's been going on for a long time. And she has great self-confidence and great security, and you feel that in her presence that you feel optimistic and that all is well, and she's absolutely great to be with. But it would be useless my telling you her name because she happens to be a personal friend of mine. But I can't think offhand.
What does she do?
She is a director of a company.
So basically, you feel secure by being in her presence.
Mm.
She gives you a feeling of security.
Definitely. I'm just trying to think of people. See, most of my friends, well-known friends, are politicians and people in show business and other journalists. Obviously, those are the circles in which I move. So those would be the people who are my friends. Well, I've never yet met a secure politician. It's the most insecure profession that I should imagine there is. I've certainly never met anybody who feels secure in show business. They're the most insecure people in the world. They always expect to be out of work tomorrow, and they're always nervous about their performances and so on. When I say show business, I mean actors. I don't mean pop stars. I don't know any pop stars at all. But I know people like, I know a few DJs, for example. And certainly other journalists are not secure because journalism is not a very secure profession.
What do you think they would be like if they were secure? Do you think insecurity gives them drive, wanting to do better, or at least keep the same standard?
Yeah, I think it does. See, I think that complacency is, I suppose, if you're secure, you're complacent. If you are 100% secure in every way, you would be a pretty complacent
How about
person.
this friend of yours?
Well, no, she's not complacent, curiously enough. But she's got a very lively mind. She's very intelligent.
Doesn't intelligence give you a definite lack of security? Because doesn't intelligence make you realise that there aren't the right ways about doing things? There is never a right or wrong about any argument, and that basically everything is a fraud and everything is a facade to be seen through and to go to even deeper?
Probably, but you see, I think a lot depends on judgment. This particular friend of mine has immensely sure judgment. Immensely.
herself?
No. Oh, well, I don't know about herself. About the things she does. I mean, for example, if we go shopping together, as we sometimes do, while I'm dithering about whether to buy something that's green or something that's pink or something this length or something that length, she's already bought and paid for the thing. She's immediately spotted and said, yes, that's the one I'll have. That's the sort of person she is. Fantastic judgment at every level of her life. And she sounds unspeakable, but she isn't, and I'm absolutely devoted to her.
How about if you have a problem that you want to discuss with her, does she listen?
Absolutely, yes. Oh, absolutely. She's the one person that I would go to if I have any, in fact, that I do go to when I have things that worry me personally. I mean, I can talk to my husband about any sort of problem, but outside of my own close family circle, she is the one that I go to, and upon whose judgment I totally rely. Totally.
Did you feel secure with your parents? Did you feel very warm and safe?
Oh, yes, of course, I did, indeed.
When did you feel most safe? Was there any time when you...
I don't know, you know, it's a bit like happiness, isn't it? This feeling, it's introspective. I mean, you very rarely can ever say to yourself, this is the moment I'm happy. It's something you look back on, and you say, I was happy then. And I think that this feeling, especially, you know, when you look back to your childhood, you have an overall feeling, a knowledge, stronger than a feeling, a knowledge that you were safe and that nothing could harm you.
I'm just thinking of times, for instance, when children have a nightmare and they go into their mother's bed or something like that and sort of cuddle up, you know, and they must feel very safe because the danger's past and they've got someone that they know, you know, won't hurt them.
Well, I think that I'm sure that my sister and I had that sort of feeling all our childhood until we married. My parents never, for example, allowed us children to know when anything was wrong. I mean, it wasn't until we left home and married and began to, you know, our mother talked to us then, I suppose she regarded us as being grown-up people then, that we ever realized that they had problems, financial problems. That my mother, for example, my father was a great gambler, and my mother must have had a very insecure marriage. At any rate, certainly not emotionally insecure, because she adored my father. They were married for 41 years until he died. But we realized afterwards how insecure she must have been. But we never knew when we were children. We had no idea.
Did she talk to you about this?
Oh, afterwards, yes, certainly.
So insecure in the way that she never really knew whether...
she never knew whether we were going to be rich or poor, you know. And sometimes when we were young, my sister and I used to think it was a bit funny that one winter we would have new coats with fur collars, and the next winter we wouldn't have coats at all. But we didn't realise why.
So really you have been brought up with insecurity, or you didn't really know it?
That's right. But we had no idea when we were little, because we were protected and sheltered from any knowledge of it by both our parents.
So again, it's what we said right at the beginning, you had emotional insecurity, so all the other insecurity around you was really
irrelevant. Yeah.
But yet your mother did feel a slight sense of insecurity.
Well, she must have said an enormous sense.
She was worried about what would happen to the children.
What would happen to the children.
Yes.
And we never heard them quarrel, for example. I can never, ever recall hearing my mother and father quarrel. I imagine they must have done. I can't think of any marriage where people don't yell at each other. But never can I recall them quarrelling, or shouting, or getting angry with each other. And we were brought up in a pub. My father was a publican. And so our family life used to start rather late in the evening. Like when we were quite little girls, the pub didn't close until, I think it was 10 or 10:30 or something. And by the time my father had cleared everything up downstairs, we often started our evening at 11 o'clock at night. Two little girls playing cards at midnight. But, you see, there was always this great sort of cosy cocoon that was our childhood. Our father and mother were never able to go away on holiday together. I never remember them going away together. And my mother used to take us away on holiday. And while my father looked after the pub. And then my father had very few holidays because he didn't like to be separated from my mother and us children. But sometimes he used to go off with one of his brothers when he really needed to take a holiday. And then my mother used to be there to keep an eye on the pub. But despite this, you see, we grew up with this fantastic feeling of being protected. I never went on a public vehicle, a bus or a train, on my own until just before I got married. It's true that I got married just after I left school, but never unaccompanied.
I actually think security has been fantastically important to you, really, because you've never really known any other.
Well, not until the war.
Oh yes, of course. But then,
and then life changed for everybody.
I get the impression, I suppose it's a very romantic impression of the Second War, as being everyone together, and this fantastic feeling, that we'd all, stay together and we'd win, and there was a definite good and evil thing involved in this.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm sure it wasn't like this, and I'm sure there was a hell of a lot of insecurity and panic and defeaters and all this kind of stuff.
And dodging bombs.
Did you feel this was...
Well, of course I did. I mean, I was all part of this, everybody being together to win the war thing, although I was, as I say, very young, and I had a young baby. But, I was working in London all through the war, dodging bombs, having to sort of hover over my child's cot because the windows were blown out every night, and it got to a point when I couldn't keep snatching him out of his cot and running down the stairs and hiding under the staircase. And I used to just sort of stand there so that the glass would hit me and not him if it blew into the room and not out of the room. And after all, his father was away in the Far East fighting the Japs. I never knew when I'd get that telegram from the War Office. I never knew whether I'd see him again. Sometimes weeks and weeks would go by and I never had a letter from him because, he was in Burma and he was in India, Ceylon, and Africa, and he never had any home leave in all the years of the war. And, our baby was a baby in arms when he went away, an infant, and a schoolboy when his father came home. And I was very hard up. I was getting 38 shillings a week from the grateful government, from my husband, to win the war single-handed. So I was very hard up. I had to used to work far into the night so that I could look after my baby during the day. Went without food, went without clothes, and we were, young people, everybody living in England in those days had a hard time. And certainly, despite all the camaraderie, when you were in an air raid shelter all together and all singing songs out of a kind of bravado, nevertheless, life was fraught with fear and insecurity and lack of money and lack of a real hope for the future.
You really didn't see... What did you see the future as being?
I never used to think about the future. In those days, you used to just pray that you'd be alive the next day. That was the future, that tomorrow...
But this is what you think basically today, don't you? That, you basically live for today, and you just hope that the children that are growing up now will carry on.
Will have a better time tomorrow,
Yeah. Do you sleep well? Do you have any trouble sleeping?
Yep, I sleep very well.
Because I would think that would probably be slight insecurity if you couldn't sleep, if you had to rely on sleeping pills, which a lot of people do.
Oh no, I don't ever take pills. I have a very bad hip, dislocated hip, so that sometimes keeps me awake, but that's the only thing. It's pain that keeps me awake, and then I just take painkillers. I was in a car crash many years ago, and it damaged my spine, and as a consequence I have a damaged hip.
Do you drive?
Mm-hmm. No, not anymore. I can't. I do drive. When I say I do, I can drive, and I did drive until about 3 years ago. But then my hip got very bad indeed, and I was in fact in a wheelchair some little time. And the orthopaedic bloke who looks after me said it was inadvisable for me to drive the car on my own, because if my hip locks, as it does occasionally, the joint separate, then it might be a bit dangerous for me to be driving along the embankment. So I now have a chauffeur, a Daily Mirror chauffeur, who drives me everywhere. And if I drive on my own, if I'm driving as I do at weekends sometimes, just to keep my hand in, I like driving, I only drive if I've got my husband with me, or sometimes my son or my daughter-in-law, somebody who could take over.
So the fact that you were in an accident hasn't made you trepidatious about either driving or being driven in traffic or anything like that? How do you feel about going on aeroplanes?
I'm terrified. I have to be dragged on aeroplanes. I really do.
You've got no control over it.
Possibly. I don't know what it is. This is another thing that I've tried very hard to rationalise, because obviously I've had to fly. I've flown all around the world. But I'll go to considerable lengths not to fly if I can manage somehow to get from A to B without flying. The last time I went to Paris, I went by boat and train, and I'm going to Switzerland in June to attend a conference, and I've persuaded my husband that it would be a marvellous idea to have a holiday in Switzerland and take the car. And all this is because this is an elaborate plot on my part, simply to avoid getting in an aeroplane.
And these talks that you give yourself when you go to parties don't work with aeroplanes?
Not at all.
So what do you... Have you obviously you consciously tried to stop this because it's part of your job that you do fly.
Yes.
But you still... You haven't changed your feeling about it at all? You still get the same clammy hands?
Oh, terrified. And the only time I drink... they know me at Heathrow. I'm sure they recognise my footsteps, because I go into that little VIP room up there, and they've got the dry martini already shaken up and ready to pour out, because I came to the conclusion that a vodka martini is the quickest. It's like, it's like an intravenous injection. And bang, bang, and they pour out these huge measures of martini, which I swallow. Hands are shaking, and I start drinking. And then I get on the plane, paralytic almost.
So
I've
this
arrived
would-
drunk at more airports, I can tell you.
So this would be one occasion where you'd really like someone to sit you down and say, now look, Marge, you've just got to get over this, and this is the advice I'm going to give you, and I hope you'll take it. I suppose
Yeah,
you
but
have
you
that kind
can't. I have had. I mean, I've had all sorts of advice from all sorts of people. My doctor, who once said it's rubbish, nonsense, and gave me severe talking to, he said, you take these pills, and you won't need to get drunk, and you mustn't drink. And I was flying to Russia on a charter plane, and I don't know how it took off because it was so loaded with alcohol for this party that was going over there, and there was only one person stone cold sober, and that was me, and the pills didn't work, and I hung on to the arms of the seat the whole way to Moscow, terrified out of my mind, and nobody taking any notice of me because they were all having a great time. And you just have to sit there and sit it out. I've been on plane rides where I've sat in the plane, and I went to Japan, for example. One hop was 10.5 hours. Well, you can't go demented, that's the point. You get to a point where you think, oh, well, that's it. Here I am, and that's it. Nothing I can do about it. Can't get out.
But yet still, every time you think about going on a plane, every time you board a plane, you still go through the same motions.
Go through it all,
Yeah.
with agony.
Do you lose your appetite?
Oh, yeah, can't
Do you
eat.
have to keep going to the toilet?
Can't eat. No, not once I'm on there.
No.
Have terrible diarrhea before I start.
Really?
But once I'm on the plane, I'm frightened to move. I have to sort of, I'm bursting to go to the loo, and then I think, oh my God, I'd better go,
Would you like to define insecurity?
That's a hard one to define. And I think it means different things for different people.